with, I think, a lot of people is it's almost construed as background.
Vince Gill had everything a country music singer could want. He had 21 songs that reached #1 on the charts, 22 Grammy Awards, and people called him the golden voice of country music. But in the year 2000, he did something that made half of his fans very angry with him. He married Amy Grant. Both Vince and Amy had just gotten divorced from their first husbands and wives. Many people in the Christian community said this was wrong and called it adultery. Radio stations stopped playing their music. People came to his concerts with mean signs. Now, 25 years later, Vince is 67 years old and having lots of health problems. The man who once had everything is now watching it all slip away. Vince Gill was born on April 12, 1957, in Norman, Oklahoma. His family was very unusual because his father was a federal judge who could also play music really well. His dad could play the banjo, guitar, and harmonica like a professional musician. After long days in the courtroom, Judge Gill would come home and play music late into the night with his wife Jiren, who also played the harmonica. Young Vince would lie in his bed listening to their beautiful music floating down the hallway. Neighbors still remember those summer nights when the sound of guitars and harmonicas would drift out onto the streets. This strange mix of serious courtroom work and joyful music made a big impression on Vince's heart. Growing up wasn't easy for Vince. He was born with crossed eyes, which wasn't just a small problem. He had to have 2 painful surgeries to try to fix them. Even after the operations, his left eye would still wander when he got tired or upset. He later said that he started wearing glasses not just to see better, but to hide the eye that made him feel broken and different. Kids at school teased him so much that he started staying away from people. Instead of hanging out with friends, he stayed home alone with his guitar. He wasn't running away from the world, he was building a new world for himself through music. When Vince was 10 years old, something terrible happened to his family. His half-brother Bob got into a bad car crash on a rainy highway outside Oklahoma City. Bob had been a smart student and a good athlete, but the accident left him with brain damage so bad that he couldn't even remember people's names. For over 25 years, Bob needed someone to take care of him all the time. Judge Gill had to work extra jobs to pay for all the medical care. Vince watched his parents' marriage fall apart under all the stress and worry. Bob finally died in 1993 from a heart attack caused by his injuries. That pain never left Vince, and years later he said those hard times taught him what it really meant to lose something important. All that sadness poured into his songs, the kind that make people cry quietly in their cars. When Vince was just 5 years old, he visited his grandmother's house and picked up her old acoustic guitar. He tried to play a song called Old Shep. In just 30 minutes, without any lessons at all, he figured out the chords and started singing. His grandma was amazed and called Vince's parents to tell them she had just seen something very special. By the time Vince turned 10, his family had saved enough money to buy him a Gibson ES 335 electric guitar. That guitar cost almost $800.00 in 1967, which would be about $6,500.00 today. It wasn't just a gift, it was like his family was saying that Vince wasn't just a kid with a hobby, he was a real musician. Music became Vince's escape when things got tough at home. Instead of getting angry or acting out, he would disappear into his guitar playing. He spent 6 to 8 hours every day playing, mostly alone in the basement. Friends and family remember hearing sad, emotional music echoing through the walls. His music teacher later said that Vince had a deep, aching sound in his playing that was far beyond what you'd expect from someone his age. He didn't talk about his pain, he turned it into beautiful melodies. By high school, Vince had started a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke. On March 4th, 1976, something crazy happened. They got to open for Kiss. Yes, the rock band with all the makeup and crazy costumes. The show was at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, and the crowd didn't know what to think about a bunch of kids playing bluegrass music. They wanted fire and leather, but instead they got fiddles and banjos. The crowd booed them and threw cups and even shoes at the stage. Vince got so mad that he flipped off the crowd, mooned them, and stormed off stage. It was embarrassing and raw, but also unforgettable. After that disaster, the band fell apart, but Vince didn't give up on music. He moved to Kentucky and joined a group called Bluegrass Alliance. By 1977, he was in a band called Boone Creek, playing with a young musician named Ricky Skaggs. The two of them were amazing together and helped create a new sound that mixed old-school bluegrass with a modern edge. Even though the group didn't last long, their style influenced many other musicians. The one album they recorded in 1977 is now considered a treasure that people still talk about like they discovered buried gold. Later that same year, Vince packed up again and headed west to Los Angeles. He joined a band called Sundance, led by fiddle player Byron Berline. Berline was no joke. He had played with legendary musicians like Bill Monroe and the Flying Burrito Brothers, and he expected perfection from everyone in his band. Vince learned fast and worked hard. They played at the Palomino Club, one of LA's most famous music venues, and got to perform with legends like Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. Less than a year after being booed off stage in Oklahoma, Vince was now playing with Grammy-winning musicians. That kind of comeback takes serious courage and determination. In September 1978, a band called Pure Prairie League was falling apart. Their lead singer had just left to start a new band, and the group was desperate to survive. They started holding auditions to find someone who could keep their music alive. That's when Vince entered their lives. 2 years earlier, in 1976, he had opened for Pure Prairie League with his band Mountain Smoke in Oklahoma City. They had noticed him right away. He was only 19, but his talent was obvious. They offered him a spot back then, but he said no because bluegrass was still his passion. Now in 1978, he was in Los Angeles playing with Sundance. One night, he jammed with Pure Prairie League again, and within hours, they offered him the job. This time, he said yes. Vince became the new frontman for Pure Prairie League. He wasn't just singing, he was playing guitar, mandolin, and fiddle, basically anything with strings. At 21, he was stepping into a bigger spotlight than ever before. By 1979, the band was recording their next album called Can't Hold Back in Miami. It would be their 7th studio album, but the first with Vince as a full-time member. His presence changed everything. His voice added something smooth and emotional, and he also started writing songs that blended country warmth with pop melodies. Then came 1980, and that's when things really exploded. The band released an album called Firin' Up, and it included their biggest hit ever, Let Me Love You Tonight. The song shot up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Vince sang lead, and his voice carried the entire track. They even brought in jazz legend David Sanborn to play saxophone. It was smooth, catchy, and fresh. Vince didn't stop there. He wrote 5 more songs on that same album. The sound had shifted to something softer, more polished, and leaning into country pop, with Vince leading that change. But good times don't always last. In 1981, they released Something in the Night, which had a minor hit but didn't connect with fans like the last album. Then, disaster struck behind the scenes. Casablanca Records, their record label, went bankrupt and was sold to another company. The new owners dropped most of their artists, including Pure Prairie League. Without a record deal and with disappointing sales, the band was stuck. Vince and guitarist Jeff Wilson left in early 1982. Vince had already caught attention as a solo artist and soon signed with RCA Records. Pure Prairie League tried to continue without him, but the magic was gone. During this same time, something else important happened in Vince's life. While building his music career in California, he met Janice Oliver, who was part of a country duo called Sweethearts of the Rodeo. They started as friends in the music scene, but things quickly grew more serious. In 1980, they got married. 2 years later, on May 5, 1982, their daughter Jennifer was born. In 1982, Vince thought he was about to become a big star. His song, Let Me Love You Tonight, had gotten attention, and he felt sure his solo career was about to take off. So when Rodney Crowell invited him to join his band, the Cherry Bombs, Vince said no. He wanted to make it on his own. But the music world can be cruel. As the year went on, his momentum faded. His songs didn't make the charts, gigs dried up, and his confidence turned to doubt. By the end of the year, Vince was struggling. So early in 1983, he called Crowell back and accepted the offer. Joining the Cherry Bombs turned out to be the smartest move he could have made. This wasn't just any backup band. It was a powerhouse group of musicians, including Tony Brown and Emory Gordy Jr., names that would later help shape the sound of country music. The band was on the road constantly, playing close to 200 shows a year. It was exhausting, but educational. Vince sharpened his guitar skills, improved his stage presence, and made connections that would pay off for the rest of his life. He learned how to survive in the music industry not by chasing fame, but by playing the long game. That same year, Vince made a bold move. He packed up his life in Los Angeles and moved to Nashville with his wife Janice and their young daughter Jennifer. It wasn't glamorous. Money was tight. They lived in a small rental house, and Vince took any job he could get. One of those jobs was playing guitar for Rosanne Cash, who was married to Kroll at the time. That tour in 1983 became like a classroom for Vince. Cash's band was tight, polished, and demanding. Vince had to grow up fast, balancing fatherhood with late-night rehearsals and uncertain paychecks. But those months in Nashville made him tougher, sharper, and more focused. Meanwhile, Tony Brown, his old bandmate from the Cherry Bombs, was climbing the ranks in Nashville. By 1984, Brown had become head of A&R at RCA Records. He hadn't forgotten about Vince and believed he had something special. Brown started pushing hard behind the scenes, pitching Vince's demo recordings to RCA's Joe Galante and calling in every favor he had. His efforts worked. In early 1984, Vince landed a solo deal with RCA. It wasn't just about talent, it was about trust. Brown knew Vince could deliver, and he stuck his neck out to prove it. Vince didn't waste the chance. His first solo release, a 6-song EP called Turn Me Loose, came out in February 1984. 3 of the songs made it into the top 40, with Victim of Life's Circumstances reaching number 34. It wasn't a smash hit, but it was enough to get people's attention. Vince spent long hours in Nashville's Woodland studios recording with top session players. He didn't want filler tracks. He wanted every second to count. That dedication showed, and the EP signaled that Vince wasn't just another hopeful voice in country music. He was a serious artist ready for bigger stages. That same year, things got even better. On April 10, 1984, Vince was named the Academy of Country Music's top new male vocalist. It was his first major award, and for a moment it seemed like everything was finally falling into place. But fame didn't come overnight. His next album, The Things That Matter, dropped in 1985. It was good, but it didn't break through. Between 1984 and 1988, none of his singles cracked the top 10. Vince kept working and kept improving, but the spotlight stayed just out of reach. Still, that ACM award was a reminder that he had the voice, the talent, and the industry watching. By 1989, Vince was 32 years old and dangerously close to being forgotten. His records hadn't taken off, and RCA didn't know what to do with him. But Tony Brown wasn't done yet. Now working at MCA Records, Brown made another bold pitch. He convinced the label to sign Vince. It was a gamble. Most labels focused on younger acts, but Brown believed Vince's best work was still ahead. And he gave him a fresh sound, stronger songs, and a team that understood him. Signing with MCA wasn't just a new contract, it was a second chance. That chance paid off fast. In October 1989, Vince released When I Call Your Name. It was unlike anything else on the radio. The album mixed country, pop, rock, and even bluegrass. It didn't follow trends, it made its own. Songs like Oklahoma Swing with Reba McEntire added a traditional feel, while others like Never Knew Lonely leaned into a softer, emotional sound. The title track, though, was the real standout. Vince's voice cut through like glass, pure, aching, and unforgettable. Critics loved the mix of styles, fans couldn't stop playing it, and Nashville started paying attention again. When I Call Your Name didn't just earn radio play, it made history. The single climbed to number 2 on the Billboard country chart. Suddenly, Vince wasn't just a respected musician, he was a hitmaker. At the 1990 CMA Awards, the song won Single of the Year. 1 year later, it won Vince his first Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The same song that almost didn't get released ended up changing his life. The emotion, the vocals, the production, it all came together at just the right time. Vince had arrived. In 1992, the album went platinum, which means it sold over 1 million copies. That kind of success was rare, especially for a singer over 30 who hadn't had a major hit before. Radio stations couldn't get enough of his music, and concert promoters lined up to book him. The guy who once couldn't get a job had become one of the hottest acts in country music. Even with all his fame, Vince didn't become stuck up. He became one of Nashville's top session players, which means other famous singers wanted him to play on their albums. He worked with Reba McEntire, Emmylou Harris, Rosanne Cash, and even rock singer Bonnie Raitt. He could play any style of music without missing a beat. Between 1992 and 1994, Vince was everywhere, on country radio, at award shows, and in sold-out arenas. Rosanne, in just those 2 years, he had 4 straight #1 hits: I Still Believe in You, Don't Let Our Love Start Slipping Away, One More Last Chance, and Trying to Get Over You. Each song hit the top of the country charts because Vince had found the perfect mix of old-school country heart and new-school polish. By the end of the 1990s, things started to change in Vince's personal life. In 1998, he released an album called The Key that was about the end of his 17-year marriage to Janice Oliver. Every song was filled with raw honesty about heartbreak and change. Critics called it his boldest work yet. It didn't sell as many copies as his earlier records, but it didn't need to. The Key wasn't just another hit, it was a turning point. But Vince's private life was about to make headlines. In 2000, he married Amy Grant, who was known as the queen of Christian pop music. She had sold over 30 million albums and won 6 Grammy Awards. Both Vince and Amy had just gotten divorced from their previous spouses. Vince's divorce was finalized in 1998, and Amy's was finalized in 1999. The problem was that Vince and Amy had met back in 1993 while they were both still married to other people. Rumors about their relationship had followed them for years. When they finally went public as a couple, it shocked fans of both singers. For some fans, it wasn't just gossip, it felt like betrayal. Amy's Christian fans took it especially hard. She had been the symbol of wholesome, faith-based music for decades. Her songs were played in churches and youth groups. She wasn't just a singer to many people, she was a spiritual role model. When news of her divorce and remarriage hit, many of her Christian fans turned against her. Some radio stations stopped playing her music. Others said they felt like they were mourning. In 2013, the controversy came back. Vince was scheduled to perform at a venue in Kansas City when protesters from the Westboro Baptist Church showed up outside. Their signs said things like, "God hates adultery," and "Vince Gill took another man's wife." Most celebrities would have ignored them, but Vince didn't. He walked right up to them and confronted them face to face. One protester shouted, "What are you doing with another man's wife? Don't you know divorce plus remarriage equals adultery?" Vince didn't back down. Jesus also said a lot about forgiveness, about grace, he shot back. "You guys don't have any of that." The moment was caught on video and went viral. Fans praised his courage and the way he handled hate with truth and dignity. In 2020, something unexpected happened. Vince went to a doctor's appointment with Amy. It was supposed to be a routine visit for her, but strangely, both of them were told they needed more tests. That's when Vince found out he had a rare heart condition called PAPVR. Less than 1% of people have it, and many never know. In his case, some of the veins in his lungs were sending blood to the wrong side of his heart, making it work harder for decades without him knowing. It could have led to sudden heart failure, but somehow he had survived with it all this time. Just weeks later, both Vince and Amy needed open-heart surgeries, one right after the other. Amy went first, and Vince followed shortly after. This happened during the COVID-19 pandemic when hospitals weren't allowing visitors, during the same time when they were booked up too fast. Howard is a doctor, so instead of being there for each other, they had to recover alone. Vince later said those days were some of the loneliest of his life.